I'm Tim Dye. I'm director of the Pontiac Museum and editor of the Smoke Signals. So we've got a lot of ground to cover, and we're just going to talk about some things that's happened since I last saw you, which is going to fill up my time with no problem. So we'll get started. This is the Pontiac Oakland Museum in Pontiac, Illinois. If you've not been there, this is what it looks like. Oh, I got to do one more little thing here. I got a little pointer here. Okay, the building, that's the museum right there. So if you haven't been there, I just wanted you to see what it looks like. It's right on the town square. So we've been open now for 12 years. Before the pandemic, we were getting around 18,000 visitors a year. We're slowly getting back up to that number. It's taken a little bit. This is our library. And if you want to pop in and use the library, you should give us some notice ahead of time. But it's no problem to do that. We just need some notice so we can be sure to have somebody there to help you with it. And then, of course, we have lots of stuff to see there. Also, if you want to bring a group, we offer behind-the-scenes tours as well. So that's, everybody's asking about the museum in Pontiac, Michigan. So I'm going to talk a little bit about that. We've come a long way in the last few months. And the paint wasn't even dry on the ceiling. We just painted the ceiling, and actually it got a little darker than this. So that was a big deal. Well, everything's a big deal. When you work off of donations, everything comes slow, and it's a big deal when it gets working. The walls have already been painted. This is the phase one part. So this is the theater. So it's come a long way. Even since this picture, we now have doors hung there. We have more painting done. The fire suppression has just gotten finished up, which is another big deal. When I say big deal equals big money, you know what I mean? So it's a big deal. Anytime you get plumbers and electricians and the like in there, your checking account, you can hear the sucking noise of vacuum. So anyway, the theater is nearly toward the end. Our plan there is to have folks come in and they'll see a brief video about the history of transportation in Pontiac, Michigan. So, and then they go out and look at the museum. So this is the women's room. And since this, we've gotten a second coat of paint. We've had the toilets installed and the dividers are up. So even since this picture, this has come quite a ways. That's tile, by the way, on the bottom there. So I think it's going to turn out real nice. So the men's room is similar, but it's a whole different set of colors. So this is one of our volunteers, and he's extremely excited because we have toilets and we have the dividers up. So again, it's a big deal. I remember the first time I walked in the bathrooms, I flipped the light on. I'm like, oh, this is special, you know? All that stuff you take for granted at home and other places you go, it's really amazing when it happens. So you're going to see this mural several times throughout my presentation, but this is the one in Pontiac, Illinois, and this has literally become an icon on Route 66. You do not go down Route 66 without stopping in Pontiac, Illinois and getting your picture taken, either standing out there or with your car. So we wanted to do something similar for the museum in Michigan. So there's lots of themes. We don't have Route 66 in Michigan, but we have Woodward Avenue. And it's just a block and a half from the museum. So that was part of our theme. So we actually got a paint company, Axo Nobel, to donate money to help pay for the mural. And this is a volunteer crew from their company doing the size, it's 15 feet tall and 35 feet long. And they did the primer on it. So it looked like that when they finished up, and that dried for a couple days. And then I worked with the Diaz Sign Art Company in Pontiac, Illinois, who I think are the best in the country at doing murals. And we came up with a design. We went back and forth a little bit. They're really good to work with, very talented people. So what they do then is when they first show up, they at night project a picture of the mural on the wall, and then they go out there with Sharpies and outline every single thing on the mural. And so they were there until 2:30 in the morning, outlining with a Sharpie all the images on there. So this is what it looks like, when they finish with that part of it. So then the next day when we all got up, we went over there, they let me put the first paint on it. So that was special. And I did help a little bit throughout the whole process. I didn't paint a whole lot, but I did some. It's fun to do. So they just spend the next 4 days painting, the mural. And, just little by little, I just kept taking pictures as they went along. This is a great picture from the roof. So we got Joe Diaz here. We got his brother Ben, and then this is Doug Hafner. Now they do a lot of different things at their company, but when they do this, they're called wall dogs, and they go across the country doing these murals like this at different times. I'd say they might do like 2 a year, because it's quite a deal to do it. So here's Joe working with some colors. And then they print out, like there's the one full color print you see there, but then I want to say this had like 17 colors in it. And they printed out a print, 17 different ones that had just that color on it, that they could reference while they were painting it. So as we go along, it just keeps filling in. And then he did make a couple changes along the way, like he thought that gray was too dark, so he lightened it up. And then I had a friend bring his 68 GTO for the week as for reference. And when they were painting the car, I had it sitting there so they could see that. And it just keeps filling in as you go. So here's the finished product. It turned out pretty neat. So there's, how can I say this? You could have put 100 things in this mural to represent the museum in Pontiac, Michigan, but you can't do that. You got to kind of pick the most important or some of the, whatever you can work in. So what you're seeing is Pontiac, Michigan, the name of the city where you're at. Of course, I don't know if I said, but the whole idea is just like in Illinois to pull up, take a picture with your car, put it on social media. So it helps promote the museum and the city and everything. So we got a GTO, one of the, of course, most popular Pontiacs. And then that ad itself is very famous. We got the name of the museum. We got these images of factories in the background for the industry there in town. We have a production line, which everything had to be produced on the line. We have found 44 different companies in Pontiac, Michigan that made wheeled vehicles. So this is just representative of all that. And then we actually have a black guy here on the line because that was a huge story in Pontiac, Michigan. They called it the Great Migration, where they moved from the south to work at the factories. So we wanted to represent that. And then, of course, we have a GMC, which most all the GMCs were made there in Pontiac. So that's what all you're seeing there, not just, you know what I mean. It all has meaning. So, and then at the end, being artsy like they are, they got in the spirit and put a little Pontiac crest when they signed their name on the mural. So I thought that was pretty neat. So that just got finished just like 3 weeks ago. So something else that's going on right now is Hemmings Muscle Machines is featuring one of the museum cars, the 70 Formula Firebird that we have. And so that's the one that has 436 miles on it from new. If you remember the story that I put in the magazine, I will never put you on the spot and ask you, did you read the story? I'm just telling you I put it in there. So. Anyway. So this is a 4-speed POCI performance axle, tacking gauges, no radio. You can see the block-off plate right there. No air conditioning, no wheel options. Special order paint. Could not get black and 70 on a Firebird, so that's special order paint. Just an awesome car. So you can see the feature on that July issue, Hemmings Muscle Machines. Another great promotion for the museum. And then this is another project we finished up over the winter. I got this from Alan Rands. I don't know if any of you know him, longtime POCI member of Illinois. He bought Arnie Beswick's 61 race car. And this is the first hood for Arnie Beswick that had a scoop. So Alan restored that car to its original the way it was at the very beginning. You know, race cars change a lot over the course of one season even. So at some point during the year, Arnie added this hood scoop to it. But Alan restored it back to the original, and he put this in his barn. Well, I was there a couple years ago photographing cars of his for the magazine, and he took me in the barn and said, "Do you want this?" And I said, "Sure." And so here's a picture of the car, and there's Arnie right there with the scoop on it. Here's another photo of the car with the scoop on it, and here's what it looks like now. So we're pretty much finished with it. I have put right there where the hood pins go, I have put this, the pieces that go there. So that's pretty well finished up. So I'm going to take it to Norwalk in a couple weeks and have him autograph it for the museum, and we'll hang it on the wall. I think it'll be a neat piece. And then another project we did was a Pontiac buggy that we restored. Of course, that's the beginning of Pontiac history. And here's what it looked like when we got it. That's part of the seat laying on the ground right there. It was fairly complete. There's the dashboard right there. And then we had the seat pieces. And it wasn't all rotten. The wheels were pretty intact and everything, so it wasn't a bad project to start with. Brett Mason, who's a pinstriper, he did the pinstriping on it. Buggies were rich with pinstripes. We have some original Pontiac Buggy Company catalogs, and when you look, they all have a lot of pinstriping on them. So I just kind of let him go. I said, don't get too crazy, but we want to embellish on it like they would have originally. So there it is now. So it turned out really nice. So the dash is actually patent leather. These pieces are patent leather. These are the shafts. We had the Martin Buggy Shop in Napanee, Indiana, do the upholstery, the seat, and the top. Anyway, it just turned out really nice. Here's some more of Brett's pinstriping on the wheels. And then here's because I know some of you are going, how do you know it's a Pontiac buggy? Well, that right there is how you know. I wouldn't have bought it otherwise. There's some more of Brett's pinstriping where the whip holder is, and you can see the patent leather. We have an original one in the museum in Illinois, and you can see what patent leather looks like after 120 years. It's not shiny anymore. So, then here's some more pinstripe. So that's kind of a dark, deep maroon with the orangey shred pinstripe. So I have a two-seat one with two seats that I want to do, and I've already picked out the colors. It's going to be Brewster green with mint green pinstripes. I think it's going to look awesome. And the two-seat ones have patent leather fenders. So that'll look really nice. So this is like the back page of the brochure with Chief Pontiac on it. That's the buggy company's image of the Chief. Of course, made in Pontiac, Michigan. So some of you may know, Bill Collins passed away recently. Seems like we've been losing a lot of the great guys here lately. So he showed up one day with one of these. You may not be familiar with it. This is a Vixen. So when he was the assistant chief engineer at Pontiac, when he left there, he went with DeLorean as the chief engineer for the DeLorean. And then when that fell apart, he came back to Pontiac, Michigan, started his own company building RVs. And he called them the Vixen. They ended up making about 575, somewhere around there, of the Vixen RVs. They have a 4-cylinder diesel. They get somewhere in the upper 20 miles to the gallon. They fit in a garage. They're not too tall. They don't, and the top does pop up on them. So they kind of look like if DeLorean built an RV, you know what I mean? They kind of look like that. So this is a factory picture I found. There's not a whole lot of material out there about these, but if you do Google it, you will find some information about them. So right before he passed, Bill donated to the museum his prototype Vixen RV. And you'll notice there's one major difference when you just look at it, and that's the headlights. See how the production ones have a single on each side? And the prototype has 2 on each side. But there was only one prototype. They just kept changing it. And then when they got it about where they wanted them to be, they just stopped working with it and started making the real deal. And so this is actually in pretty good shape. It could use some TLC, but it's not bad. But what a unique piece of transportation history. And then this is me interviewing Bill some time ago at the museum in Illinois. So, and then we've had some cars donated this year. This is a 50 Pontiac. It's all original. The only exception to that is the driver's side fender was repainted at some point, may have been replaced, but I think early on. So it's just, of course, it's not shiny paint. Still got the original dealer sticker on the trunk, but it's in great shape. The interior's in great shape as well. So I had to go to Southern Illinois to pick it up, and I had to put a battery in it, and it started up fine, but I found out real quick it had no brakes, 0 brakes. And when you get a tank like that rolling, that's scary when you got 0 brakes. So what I did was I took the 2 spare tires for the trailer, I set them up in there, because you got to get it quite a bit of gas to get it up in there, and so you got some momentum going. I said, I sure hope these tires stop this car. So it all worked out fine. So up in Michigan, we have an area in the lower level that we've set aside to kind of set up a little shop down there. We keep working on it. And so this is a couple of volunteers put brakes on it. Now it stops as good as it runs. So it probably just needs cleaned up some now, but it's really a solid, nice car. And then this is another donated car out of Iowa, a 27 Pontiac. And it also is in pretty fair shape. The paint is probably from the 70s or early 80s. And it's kind of showing wear, but otherwise it's in pretty good shape. It's a solid car. And then another donation we had out of Missouri that you saw on the cover of the magazine recently was this 75 Grand Le Mans. This was a one family owned car. And as we do with every car, we get them and we kind of go over them and see what they need and so forth. Well, this one didn't need much. And the only thing was it was completely stock. I mean, they had put custom wheels on it, but they gave me the original wheels. So that's all we did to it basically was have the wheels painted and got some new tires for it. And then it was pretty well stock and correct all the way around. And even the AC works in this car, so it's a great car to drive. We took it to the Michigan Wide Tractor Show a couple weeks ago to represent the museum. And there it is there. You don't see too many of this particular model. And then here is yet another one we had donated this year, and it come out of Florida. And again, it's a super solid car, but showing a lot of wear on the paint and so forth. It's a 38 four-door sedan. I saw one just very similar to it, only nicer out in the parking lot. I don't know, maybe some of you saw that one, but very similar to this one. Have not had time to do much with this. I knew the battery was dead as a doornail, so I went and bought a battery, but I've not had time to go from there. The guy that donated it said, yes, it will run, so we'll see. But they all run when they were parked, right? So this one has a 6 in it. The one I saw outside was an 8-cylinder. So this is yet another car that the museum acquired. Now I was tracking this one for a long time. This is a 61 Tempest, and you'll see it on the cover of the July issue. This car has 24,000 miles on it. And it comes from Tulsa, and I got close to getting it before I even moved to Illinois, but I just was driving and moving so much I could not be there enough to get the job done. Then, I kind of caught back up with him when I went to Tulsa for the show last year, and we ended up getting it done. But the interior, it really shows that low miles. It's just so clean inside. And it's actually quite a loaded car. That is factory air conditioning. It's got the radio, and you see the floor mats. Speaking of the floor mats, they're just beautiful. I would not want to try to find those today. That would be a tough find, I think. But so clean on the inside. And you got to remember, this was an economy car. So when I say this, when you walk up to it, you go, I thought Tim said this was loaded. It doesn't look like it, but it is. In a Tempest, the visor on the passenger side was an accessory. So it's got it. It's got backup lights. It's got bumper guards. I mean, so when you walk around, it's got chrome trim around the windows. That was an accessory. It is loaded for a Tempest. And it had the original dealership license plate frame on it. And it's just such a clean little car. And being Motor Trend Car of the Year, I joked with my wife Penny, and I said, if a guy was doing a Pontiac Museum and you made a list of cars you want for the museum, this would be on it. It's just the technology, the engineering of it, the Motor Trend Car of the Year, this would be on your list. So here's another donated car. So you're like, what are you going to do with that? Well, I got some plans. And just so you know, I told the guy that donated it that this car was never going to get fixed. I mean, it didn't take me long at looking at it. When the floorboards are gone, the trunk floor is gone. It's a 72 luxury Le Mans, and it's just not worth, it's just not there. So, and he realized that. He was fine with that. So I got some ideas for it. Some of the parts are probably going to get sold to raise money for the museum. So every car that gets donated, it gets evaluated, and then we go from there and see what's going to happen with it. No different than what you would do, if you got a car. It's just common sense stuff. So here's another donated car. Only this one was a couple years ago, and we were collecting things for it. This is actually a really special car. Another one that was in the magazine. This was actually a rally race car sponsored by Pontiac. Has the Super Duty 4-cylinder in it. This is the day it was delivered to the museum, what it looked like. So, very well documented history. So there's the original invoice for it. It was bought by an employee, so you can see the 5% car right there. That tells you it's an employee car. Not a whole lot of options. They knew what it was going to be used for. a couple of the options I scratched my head at. I don't know why they got a couple of those, but they did. And then it was, the basis of it was Dr. Robert Aronosian, and he was the driver of the car. And within a month of getting the brand new car, this is what it looked like. So it went to the shop, started stripping it down to fix it up to be a rally race car, and there's the result of it there. And they call him Dr. Bob. Now, Dr. Bob was later killed in a car accident, not racing, but he was later killed. There's another picture of it. So here's a picture of it in action. He did not do well. This was kind of a hobby for him, you might say. And he was not an expert driver, so he didn't exactly do very well with this car. It did get a lot of press for Pontiac, though, back in the day, which was always a good thing. And then here's the rest of the team. Leo Van Houten is the guy with the hair. He's got wild hair. And his brother, Herman Van Houten, standing. And then Steve Allen is kneeling there. All three of these guys are Pontiac employees. And then one of them is Dr. Bob is the brother-in-law to one of the Van Houtens. So they were all sitting around having a beer. I don't know if you remember, Steve Allen wrote part of the story for this when I put it in the magazine. And the title of his part of the story was, "There may have been some drinking involved." That was and then this was kind of ended the career for the car. They raced it, I think, 2 different seasons, maybe a little bit into a 3rd season. And then I think this was the final straw, and that was the end of the car. And it changed hands a couple times, and the last guy that owned it wanted to fix it, never did. He passed, his wife donated it. So we started working on it at the museum. So this is the day we started stripping it down to get it ready for paint. And this is Steve Allen today. And that's Fred Bartemeyer. I call him Mr. Fierro. He literally is Mr. Fierro. And if you need to know anything, I mean anything, even down to possibly an individual car, he's your guy. So yeah, this is volunteers taking it apart, getting it ready. And this is us loading it on the trailer. Now this is up in Michigan, and I brought it back to Illinois to be painted. I kind of use the best of both worlds. And it kind of works good that way. So this is it all ready and primed, and then painted. And then kind of a big deal, the hardest thing to find to put the car back together was those Marshall lights on the front. And I was determined to find those because that was the face of the car. When you saw pictures of this car, it was those lights, and you knew it was this car. And digging around on the internet, and I found a guy who was out in California, was kind of the Marshall, guy, and I sent him an email, and we talked, and I told him about the story. He kind of was a little sympathetic for our cause and made us a good deal, because these are not cheap. And we found all the lights we needed for it. So there's 6 of them altogether, the 4 round ones and the 2 rectangle ones that hang below. So another part of my job for this car, for the restoration, was the lights and the light bar. So this is an original picture of the light bar sitting on the floor. Luckily they had documented when they built this car and taken some pretty good pictures, and Steve Allen still had them. And then this is a picture of it on the car. So luckily, between these 2 pictures and the holes that were still in the car here and here, I got out a piece of cardboard and laid in lights on there and started drawing and measuring. And I was shocked by the results. So I had a guy there in Pontiac, Illinois, who fabricated it from my drawings and from my pictures. So I kind of was replicating that picture of the original one sitting on the floor. That's the new one, and that's it installed on the car. So I couldn't believe how good, because that is not my profession whatsoever. And so there they are on the car. And then the original ones, they painted the back of them black. They all came in chrome, but they painted them black for the glare. And so I did the same thing. I took them apart and painted them black. And then this is Fred and his wife putting the car back together at our shop in Illinois. And she works at a graphics place and designs graphics for cars and trucks and so forth. So we found some original stickers on the internet, and then she reproduced some, and she came and installed them. And then this is Fred driving it out of the shop, pretty well done. So it turned out pretty neat. We got it done just in time to take it to the Detroit Autorama this year. So the museum had a booth there, and then the Fiero group put it on the cover of their magazine. It was a pretty big deal in the Fiero community because this was a really well-known car. They knew the guy that had it for a long time, thought it would never get fixed like it did, so it turned out pretty good. So then I wanted to feature it in the smoke signals. So I'm standing up at the museum in Michigan where the car is. I was leaving the next day to go back to Illinois, and where I needed to put this in the magazine. And I'm like, how am I going to photograph this car? So I wanted it to look like it was out in the wild racing, right? So I got the idea, and I made a phone call and had the guy deliver a truckload of mulch to the backyard of the museum. And he dumped it out, and I put plywood on top of it, drove the car up on it, threw mulch on top of it, carried rocks over there, pulled up some grass, stuck them in the mulch, photographed it. Anyway, I thought it turned out pretty good. Kind of looks like it's racing, so that was the whole idea. But that's how things get done, right? And then another thing we had happen was we had a PBS crew come to the museum in Illinois and do some filming there. And who it was, I had never heard of her because I don't watch PBS a lot, but I think people say that it was Samantha Brown, and she has a series called Places to Love. And she told me it would air nationwide around January or February. So be looking for that around January, February. I think it might be a show about Route 66 in Illinois, and we're probably just part of it. So, but any promotion we get is great, right? So, and then we had another film situation pop up. Director Keith Famey out of the Detroit area did some people were calling it a film. My wife and I felt like it was more of a documentary called Detroit, the City of Hot Rods and Muscle Cars. And he interviewed a lot of people, and somehow he hooked up with us at the museum up in Michigan. And then I told him about the museum in Illinois, and darn if he didn't show up with his whole film crew to film us down here for his video. So he took, it has aired on PBS up in Michigan. And I'm not sure, Penny, have you looked, can you find this on the internet if you wanted to? I don't know, Google that title and see, if nothing else, probably the short will come up. And I think one of the little shorts that he has there is called Pontiac Museum. So anyway, we went to the preview of it up in Novi, Michigan a week or two ago, and it was pretty neat, and there's a lot of Pontiac in it, because he actually put Bill Collins in it right before he passed. He filmed him, interviewed him for the film. So there's quite a bit of Pontiac. These are just still shots that I took from the video showing the museum, so pretty neat deal. So here's another story that's probably the neatest one that developed over the last year. And this series of pictures, what you're seeing right here, was taken on November 25th, 2009. And this is a row, you can see them in the background. there's a row, all the G6s at the end were white. When I say all of them, I mean, as far as the last couple hundred, or at least were all white. And so the next day was Thanksgiving, and everybody went home, and I have not been able to determine, but there may have been a layoff, or just a holiday layoff at the end. So we're not sure if this is the last one. We can't tell from anything in the picture, but there are no other cars in the background. The walking mats are rolled up. It's kind of looking like it might be. We are sure this is the last one. And they made a separate sign that's right there, and that's it there, saying the last G6, which is the last Pontiac. And this is some of the people at the factory, of course, standing around the car, realizing it's the last Pontiac. So we kind of all knew that much and not much more. And then around October, November, or the fall, maybe some of you saw it, a story come out on the internet of the last Pontiac. And it showed this car, and it gave this VIN number. And it told the whole story about how this was a rental car, how it went to Hawaii, came back to California, got totaled, went to an auction, went to Mexico. That's the last we heard of it. And how sad it was that was the fate of the last Pontiac. And so I called a friend of mine, Bob Adams, whose family ran a Pontiac dealership up in Joliet, Illinois. And he's very into Pontiacs. We had great conversations at the museum talking Pontiac. And so I called him up and I said, "Did you see that story?" And he said, "Yeah." And I said, "Well, what do you think of that?" And he said, in late 2010, my brother and I was sitting around on the GM. They have a computer at the dealership where they can access VIN numbers and print out sheets about the cars. And they just sat there and typed in VIN numbers till they got to the end. And he said, I think we got one higher than this one. So he went to his brother's and they dug out all the papers that he printed out in 2010. And he called me back and said, "Yeah, I got one that's 963. And I said, "Let's find it." And so we got on the internet and we got on Carfax first. And sure enough, we found it on there. Like all the other G6s, it was a rental car. Only this one went to Idaho, Boise, Idaho, to the airport. And then they had run it up to 15,000 miles, a little less than a year, and took it to auction. And then a dealer in Golden, Colorado bought it, a former Pontiac dealer, and put it on the lot. Nobody bought it. They took it to an auction. Then a dealer, former Pontiac dealer in Scott City, Kansas, which is far west, southwest corner of Kansas, bought it, put it on their lot. And an 82-year-old lady bought it 2 days later. And it showed in Carfax no more transfers after that. And it did show regular service and wear. So we called that place and got nowhere with them. We asked them to reach out to the owner and have them contact us. They wouldn't do it. So we were at a little bit of a dead end. And so what we did then, let me go one slide more. So here's a part of the invoice on car 963. So anyway, they wouldn't give us personal information, of course. And so I thought to myself, who can turn a VIN number into a name and address? The police can. So I got a hold of the Oakland County Sheriff, which there's 1.2 million people in Oakland County, right? And a friend of mine was pretty friendly with one of them, and they wouldn't do it, saying that they get audited on all the VINs they run. Because it's such a big force and there's so much paperwork and this and that. So I'm thinking, I need to think small. I need to go somewhere small. So I called my friend Jay Leeper in Alva, Oklahoma, which is out in western Oklahoma, and I think in their whole county there's 8,000 people in the whole county. And he's a volunteer fireman, and I think, you know, I don't know if any of you have been to them small towns, but usually the fire department and the police department share the same office. And I thought, you know, I bet he knows somebody. So I give him the VIN number, and I said, see what you can do. A couple days later, he came back with a name and address. And the officer didn't want to be named, of course. But anyway, so it ended up, it was a 94-year-old lady in Scott City, Kansas, and the address was a retirement home. And I'm like, I don't want to bother her. We don't know what condition she's in. So we got back on the internet and found out she had a daughter living in the same town. So we got on Facebook, found the daughter, reached out to her, she didn't respond. So we had an address for her. I wrote up a note saying who I was on museum letterhead. And I said we felt like she had a special car. We'd like to acquire it. She called me back. Then the conversation started. And then she says, well, you know, the car's just sitting in my driveway. My mom can't drive anymore. So I'm like, all right, perfect timing. And so she seemed very friendly, receptive to, you know, our conversation, and which it could have gone the other way. And so we talked again later, and she said, my mom, even though she can't drive, that car represents freedoms for her that she's not ready to give up. And so I went back to my friend Bob, and he's like, you know, call him, you know, we're going to lean on him. I'm like, let's just be a little patient. So the other part of this story is that I started this series of stories. I don't know if you saw them in the smoke scene. It was called The History of Pontiac, the beginning and the end. And so when I first started, I thought it was going to be 2 issues. We'll do one on the beginning, next issue on the end. Well, when I did this one sidebar story that ended up to be 5 pages, I knew right away, okay, this is going to be more than 2. It's going to be at least 3. So the whole time I'm doing that, and of course I want this car to be part of the story of the end. And so I'm doing these, and the months are going by, and it ended up being the beginning was 3 issues. And I wasn't stretching it, that's just how it kind of naturally went. But at the same time, it was working for me on the end. And so finally, I called her again one day. And my deadline for that 4th issue was coming up. And I said, well, you know, what do you think? You know, she goes, oh, she'll sell it to you. So I said, okay. So I called my friend Jay. And so, now keep in mind, my magazine deadline is the 20th of the month. And on March 17th, he picked it up. But I was not going to put that car in there until we had it in our hands. So Penny, would you pull the cover off? So many bad scenarios could have happened for this car. It could have went to a rusty state. It could have went to a kid. It could have, so many bad things. Wow. So it took 4 months. Patience, but we ended up with it. So here's another funny thing about it. They had no idea there was anything special about this car. And I was not gonna try to sneak one by on them. I mean, I told them it was a special. So the lady, who now is 94, must have never opened the trunk and looked under the covers, because it's all autographed. Any place you look in the car that you pull something back, it's autographed. So when we took the seats out to clean, I think she had a farm at one time out in western Kansas because it was a dust bowl on the inside and under the hood. So we did a lot of detailing, and she ran up on every curve she could find. So we take the front off and repainted it, had it, cleaned it up, and there were signatures under there. And so I'm thinking if you drop the headliner, if you drop the hood insulation pad, there's going to be signatures. So here's some other paperwork. So another little fun thing about this, it's been fun for me, is the dates. And how am I doing on time, Penny? I got 4 minutes. Sorry. Anyway, GM was very helpful sending me forms for it, and they sent me the invoice, and then they had this other form called something 28, an R28, is it? This had the build date on it, and this was super interesting. Well, I went ahead and got it on the one before as well, and it was built on the 25th, like the picture I showed you, that was its assembly date. But this one had the 4th of January. So 6 weeks gap between the next to last one and this one. And then the shipping date on the next to last one was December 4th. But this one shipped on January 4th of 10. And so that's the one mystery I haven't quite figured out is why this sat around for a month. Were they thinking about sending it to the Heritage Center? But they just had an auction and sold the last Oldsmobile, so we probably can't send it to the Heritage Center and we better send it down the road, so off to Idaho it went. And
took that long to sign it.
And some of the signatures are dated too, so it all jives, everything matches. It's got about 53,000 miles on it in western Kansas, nice and dry weather. So it's pretty darn good shape. So here's a little where it's been and where it's going. So it started out in Lake Orion, Michigan, and then it went to the airport in Boise, Idaho, and then it went to the auction in Idaho, and then it went to Golden, Colorado, Scott City, Kansas. My friend from Alva picked it up. Now, they did not donate the car, but we negotiated a price for what a regular 2010 G6 would sell for. And I got approval from the board because of its significant history to pay for it. But I called my friend Jay, who's a POCI member, sent him to go get it. I called him on the way back to make sure everything went okay, and I said, well, Penny will send you a check tomorrow. He said, don't bother.
So Jay donated it.
So it was in Alva, Oklahoma for a while with Jay, and then I met him in Kansas City, and we took it to Pontiac, Illinois, where I did all the detailing and the cleaning. And then it come here, and then it's going to Pontiac, Michigan. So 7 miles from where it was built. You can hug it, but don't drool on it. So in September in Illinois, we're having our 12th annual All Pontiac Show. Appreciate the support of anybody that can come. And thank you for coming today.
So we don't bump into each other.
Yeah, thanks, Tim.
Oh.
Everybody take a picture same time, like it over.
Like to get things done as an individual.
In the last, yeah.
Yeah.
When is that museum going to show you?
I mean, like, we've been waiting on a rooftop unit for 2 months. How can I say, you know,
Let us know.
yeah,
The very last Pontiac ever made.
That's really cool.
You an Apple car of it? I tried to buy a G8.